today I will be the opener for our third public lecture series for 2025. So yeah, I'm so sorry. Currently I'm outside of the office. I'm at the hotel, so please bear with me for this any noise or in my background. So yeah, for today we are at Ungku Aziz really honored to have our speaker, who is Yang Bahagia Datuk Professor Dr. Denison Jayasooria, who will be the speaker for today and will be discussed about the title topic of Malaysia sponsored resolution, how to spell it, 52/8 on promotion of human rights and SDG at the Human Rights Council, implication for effectively addressing poverty and inequality in Malaysia. So I'm so sure lots of you going to be very interested with the topic. So please listen carefully and have lots of questions later on. So yeah, for before I pass my button, I would like to introduce to the before I pass the button to our moderator, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Muhammad Khairi Ismail. He is my old friend actually. We already know for about 10 years ago. So we have studied together with the same supervisor as well at UKM. So currently he is a senior lecturer at University Technology Mara at Terengganu branch. And he is also a postdoctoral research fellow at Ungku Aziz Center for Development Study, University Malaya. So without further ado, I would like to pass the baton to the Dr. Khairi to take the platform and please moderate. Thank you.
Okay, Good morning to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, colleagues, and students. Very good morning. Actually, I'm honored and pleased to welcome all of you to the third session Ungku Aziz Talk and Public Policy Public Lecture Series 2025, hosted by Ungku Aziz Center, University Malaya. Actually, this lecture series serves as a platform to engage with key issues in public policy, governance, and we also discuss about sustainable development, reflecting the visionary idea of the late Royal Professor Ungku Aziz. And today's lecture focus on important and timely topic, which is Malaysia's Sponsor Resolution 52/8 on promotion on human rights and SDG. As at the Human Rights Council, implication for effectively addressing poverty and equality in Malaysia. Actually, the global commitment to the Sustainable Development Goal (SDG) is important in shaping policy that address the poverty, inequality, and human rights. And we can see Malaysia's role in the international arena, particularly in advance this resolution at the Human Rights Council, and its dedication to sustainable and inclusive development. And for today, we are very honored with a special guest to help us navigate this critical discussion. We have Yang Berbahagia Datuk Profesor Dr. Denison Jayasooria. Apa khabar Datuk? Sihat? Okay. Before we proceed,
Sorry, come on back. I had my speaker mic muted lah. Good morning.
Okay. Before we proceed, it's better for me to introduce our speaker, Datuk Denison. Yang Berbahagia Datuk Professor Dr. Denison Jayasooria is a respected scholar and policy expert widely recognized for its contribution in the field of sustainable development and social inclusion. As the head of Secretariat for the APPGM-SDG, he plays a crucial role in driving Malaysian commitment to the SDG, particularly in poverty eradication and equitable development. Is experienced in academia, civil society, and policy making makes him exceptionally well positioned in shed light onto the topic. Without further ado, please join us in welcoming Professor Datuk Dr. Denison for sharing for this session. Please welcome Datuk.
Make it yeah, this way. Okay, selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera. Thank you, Karil, for this introduction, dan juga thank you for this invitation to the Ungku Aziz Center. When the center was set up, I remember visiting, because that time Datuk Mustafa Muhammad was the minister, and he set up a small team of people to review and study the possibilities of setting up this center. So thank you. And as I share my thoughts and reflections on this theme, Malaysia sponsored a resolution 52/8 on promotion of human rights and SDG at the Human Rights Council. And I'm looking at implications for effectively addressing poverty and inequality in Malaysia. The focus is actually on delivery and the role of the civil service. Now, I thought it will be helpful for us to briefly look at what are the UN declarations and how do declarations differ from conventions, and conventions from resolutions. So resolutions are formal expression of opinion or the UN organ. It contains a mandate for action. There are recommendations, but a resolution of the normal by some of the different arms of the UN are not legally binding, except for resolutions of certain kind coming from the Security Council. Now, in contrast to resolutions, you have declarations, which is a statement recognizing a universal valid principle. They are formal statements or proclamations adopted by various UN organs, particularly the General Assembly. And declarations, like resolutions, are not legally binding, but countries as a whole, member states adhere to it and will sort of make adjustments of national policies towards it, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But conventions are completely different. They are agreements by which countries bind themselves under international law. So a convention has a commitment. It needs to have legislative changes in the country that signs it. And there is a tedious monitoring process in this context. So the UN has various forms, and of course, some people have said, what's the use of a resolution or declaration? There are so many wars going on, it's ineffective. But this is the only global body where member countries, 190 over, come together, and others that are not yet formally recognized states, including Palestine, attends many of these meetings. Now, here we are looking at a UN resolution, which is a formal expression of opinion or will of the UN organ. 4 institutions of the UN issue resolutions, As I said, like the Security Council, some of that would be binding. But in the case of the General Assembly or ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, or the Human Rights Council, there are resolutions that member states sponsor and support and want their countries, as well as those principles, to become mainstream globally. So that's the background. The Human Rights Council, to which this particular resolution that Malaysia sponsored, when Malaysia was a member of the Human Rights Council, 2022 to 2024. There are many others that Malaysia supported, but I thought this was significant because Malaysia took the lead. And this is at the Human Rights Council, which is an intergovernmental body within the United Nations that specifically focuses on human rights, violations in the state, independent reviews, special rapporteurs, and even the Universal Periodical Review, and so forth. Now, the Malaysia sponsored a resolution. This resolution was together with a number of countries at the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council. And the Council on 3rd April 2023 adopted this. And this is the title, the full title, Promotion of Human Rights and Sustainable Development Goals through Transparent, Accountable, and Efficient Public Service Delivery. So it's quite an important theme because it brings human rights, SDGs, and then it talks of a delivery mechanism. Now, the resolution from its title has three main themes that are coming up: promotion and protection of human rights. The word protection comes within the resolution itself, but here in the title it's only promoting human rights. So it's quite a key theme that Malaysia sponsored, calling on nations of the world to promote human rights, promoting of sustainable development goals, and this Malaysia has been doing since 2015, and we can see the effect on the SDGs in development planning and policy. But the vehicle for public service delivery is through a transparent, accountable, and efficient civil service. So this is quite significant, the words transparent, accountable, efficient, public service delivery. And a theme that we can read in development planning, the 11th, the 12th, and I'm sure the 13th Malaysia Plan, with the institutional reforms would emphasize as well. Now, the resolution itself starts with a preamble. The preamble is quite long. So what I did was I took up 5 thematic themes that I felt came out in the 10 key principles that I noted. There could be many others that are in the sentence and so forth. But I thought these 5 thematic areas and 10 principles were key in this process. And that is one, it's the role of the state. The state bears the primary responsibility to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights and fundamental freedoms. So it is an acknowledgement, it is a commitment that member states of the Human Rights Council are reaffirming that it is the state that bears the primary responsibility. One, to respect. The state cannot be a violator. The state is to respect, it is to protect, it is to fulfill human rights and fundamental freedom. So in many ways, it's the government that should be in the forefront of human rights promotion and protection. That's the first point in the role of the state. Secondly, on the role of the state, the preamble is saying the role of the public service as an essential component of good governance in the promotion and protection of human rights. So here these phrases come out, that the public service component of good governance. So these values and principles of good governance, promotion and protection is emerging as part of the role of the state. And thirdly, ensuring quality control of the delivery of services. Now, this again is an important point, quality control. That means it's not just dishing out services. There is some benchmark of measuring the quality, its precise emphasis on good governance, and so forth. And so the role of the state is one. Second theme that emerges, and it's a fourth principle, that human rights and SDGs are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. Now, this is a point that many countries in ASEAN find it difficult to take, and many countries around the world have found it difficult as well in the context that human rights and SDGs are interrelated, because many would see all the aspects related to poverty, health, education, gender equality, all as social development agenda, failing to realize that it's built on the basis of fundamental rights, the right to development. And that SDGs, while it contains 17 SDG goals, SDG 16 focuses a lot on institutions, democracy, justice, human rights, and so forth. Now, the third theme that emerges is anti-corruption concerns. Now, within the framework of human rights and SDG, anti-corruption position towards transparent, accountable, efficient public service delivery is reaffirmed, because one of the preamble statements is that corruption weakens institutions, erodes public trust in government, and creates inequitable access to public services. So corruption in many ways then linked to the public sector. I know there's a lot of discussion on who is the giver and who is the taker. The taker seems to be victimized and so forth. But whatever the case, here the theme is public service delivery must be free of corruption, both its political side as well as the civil service delivery side, because it weakens institutions, that means the institutions of check and balance. It erodes public trust, which creates political instability in the government, and it creates inequitable access in that sense. So it's these are 6 points that we have looked at. Let's look at the final 4. So access to services, the right of everyone to have access, equality to public services, including women, children, people with disabilities, rural communities, vulnerable, access to services. So the services are not just accessible to people who are in high positions and so forth, but accessible in that sense to all people, especially vulnerable sections of our society, in that way that we see. So I think it becomes a key point that we need to look at in this measure. And it's also right of access to relevant information. Here, technology, innovation, e-government, access to relevant information becomes quite. So access to the services. And finally, there is the theme of the role of civil society. So the role of civil society and other stakeholders can play in ensuring transparency, accountability, and efficient delivery. In this resolution, an important point is made that the involvement of CSOs is seen as key for the public sector success. So sometimes public sector feels civil society or NGOs are a botheration, they are making too much of noise, and so forth. But here the resolution is saying for effective civil service delivery, a vibrant civil society and other stakeholders are necessary to ensure transparency, accountability, efficient delivery. So it's within a framework of a democratic system that's being highlighted. Now, so that's the preamble that we saw some key points that we need to keep into account in it. But the main paragraph contains 11 key paragraphs. The first three makes reference to national level delivery. And then 4 to 11 makes reference to international level cooperation, analysis, comparison of best practices, and matters relating to the UN mechanism. So I think this is important to look at the details that comes out here. And our focus is on 6. I've only taken selectively rather than doing all. So para 1 is to integrate human rights. Para 2, role of government. Para 3, non-discriminatory delivery. Para 6, international cooperation. Para 9, special procedure. And then para 11, Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, which will be a special report in a year's time. So the preamble then comes with the main paragraph, and you can Google that document to get the details. So the main paragraph, paragraph 1, state role to integrate human rights principles in the national public service. The resolution encourages state to promote, instill, and integrate human rights principles in the public service. So now we need to ask ourselves in Malaysia, when and where is the government doing this in terms of integrating human rights principles in the national public service? Because this is a resolution sponsored by Malaysia. So we can see it in the work of Suharto, when the government established an independent human rights commission to carry out the work. But here it's the delivery agencies. So where is Women Ministry or Economy Ministry or Housing Ministry using the language of human rights? And how would the state promote, instill, integrate human rights principles in public service? So most often we feel civil servants sort of think human rights is Western, so they tend not to use the language of human rights. But here in this resolution, it's saying the state needs to promote it. It's not just an NGO activity. It is not just the university professor. It is not just Suharto doing it, but it's the state's responsibility. So the government of the day. So it should be ministers, it should be KSUs, it should be in the development planning, that a rights framework to development, to justice is integral. And especially in the last 2 years with the Madani government, then this should become a key priority, because this resolution was accepted and Malaysia sponsored it in 2023. So that's the first point. Second is para 2, the role of the state as a service provider with other stakeholders. I think here Malaysia is very clear, development planning. If we follow the 11th plan or the 12th plan, a whole of nation approach is quite key. And in that, there are provisions for the state to work closely, like each of the ministries have their supporting NGOs or grassroots organizations they are working with. So whole of nation approach includes in the next point, other stakeholders identified are private sector and civil society. So the tripartite relationship of government, private sector, civil society, and in that context of civil society or non-government would include professional bodies, universities, academicians, others who can complement the role of the state as a service provider. So the state could actually buy that services from any of the other agencies, or it can commission that work. Like in the case of Suakam, government allocates a certain sum of money annually to that purpose. Parliament is an institution. MACC is an institution. So these are some stakeholders that are ensuring the rights framework is enhanced. So the stakeholder, so this must become a key orientation within the civil service and the civil setup. Now, paragraph 3 is on non-discriminatory, efficient, accessible, accountable, transparent public service delivery. Non-discriminatory, I know many got confused or paranoid with ICERT alone, which is on the context of race. But non-discriminatory must include also gender, age, it should include disability, location, rural, interior, so that somebody is discriminated or doesn't have access because they come from the interior or they have some problem through transportation or language, especially if you see interiors in Sarawak, in communication and so forth, for the public sector delivery. So here, what is being highlighted is non-discriminatory is a key component of a human rights approach. Even in SDG, it's saying leaving no one behind. It doesn't matter whether it's a context of ethnicity, whether it's the context of religion, whether it's a context of gender, whether it's the context of age, whether it's a context of disability. No one should be left behind, whether citizen or non-citizen in that context, from a human rights perspective, not discriminated against. Now, here in the paragraph 3, feedback from citizens are key to building an anti-corruption environment in the public sector. I know we all want a stronger MACC and so forth, which is important. But here they're saying more citizens watch and citizens empowerment, citizens' greater role at ground level is quite important, whether it's in local government, in direct monitoring, and so forth. I know Parliament plays that role, or the State Assembly, that sometimes turns more political, but here the resolution is calling for citizens in that context. Now, fourthly, it goes on to international cooperation and national efforts. So it's benchmarking and saying there can be good examples in other countries. Let's learn from it. Or we need we might have good examples and we need to support. So Malaysian Foreign Ministry has various programs to support and train people from poorer countries, like different countries around the world that have received assistance through training or educational and empowerment programs and so forth. So I think that's a key component, capacity building and training of civil servants nationally as well as in poorer countries. And on human rights, so the topics for training is human rights, gender equality, rule of law, and good governance. So the problem sometimes is our educational system. We might be trained more in technical aspects or in accounting, in science. So we might not know liberal arts topics or topics in sociology or economics or anthropology or in law, which should have a more stronger multidisciplinary approach in our undergraduate studies. So even civil servants at the PTD level or coming into the civil service will be exposed to thematic areas like human rights, gender equality, rule of law, good governance. These are not bad topics. These are not dangerous topics. These are not anti-establishment topics, because it's coming out from a resolution that Malaysia sponsored and said all government agencies must emphasize these. Now, the other two paragraphs is actually special procedure with special mandates. Special mandates, reference to gender equality, empowerment of women, that the special measures are special rapporteurs or other independent human rights experts. Some time ago, we had the independent expert on poverty, and he came and did a 10-day visit of Malaysia. He's a professor from New York. And he made an assessment and a report calling for the change of the poverty line income and so forth. And the government then, when Datuk Mustafa Mohamad was the Minister of EPU, acknowledged, and through DOSM and through Economic Planning Unit, readjusted the poverty line. So special rapporteurs play a key role in looking at racism, gender equality, various other themes, and they come as independent experts. And it's always good because, like, you have somebody checking your audit of your accounts. You don't want your friend to check your account because there's no credibility of it. External audit or external special rapporteurs coming in to assist should be seen in positive light to bring reform, transformation, and change. Now, these experts from the Human Rights Council can only visit if Malaysia extends the invitation to them. So sometimes governments are open, sometimes governments are not, and it depends on the cabinet and so forth, but Malaysia should be open. And I'm not sure in the last 2 years who are the special rapporteurs who have come in the Madani government to make a review of the human rights situation or the situation on corruption, these kind of things, good governance, because it becomes quite useful. The final point is paragraph 11, where the resolution calls for the Office of the High Commissioner to prepare a report, which will be a participatory process in that context. So this is the resolution. So resolution looks simple, it looks straightforward, but I feel it's very dynamic and loaded, especially because Malaysia sponsored it. And when Malaysia sponsored it, then it's not just relevant internationally, it's also relevant locally as well lah. Khairil, berapa masa lagi saya ada?
Satu
Just
jam
checking.
lagi, Prof. Satu
Huh?
jam lagi. Ada 1 jam lagi, Prof.
1 jam ah?
1 jam. Lama lagi, Prof. Ada lagi.
Okay, dengan discussion.
Discussion 15 minit macam tu, Prof. 15
Okay,
minutes.
I can give more time for discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, maybe we can stop now. Ask people whether they have any questions lah, Khairil. Sebab kita dah bincang tentang the resolution. Kalau ada any soalan, it might be good. Can we ask them? Anyone has a question, if you can highlight it, I can give some feedback, or you tak setuju dengan saya ke, it's also okay. Bagus kalau you tak setuju lah. Nanti perbincangan jadi hot sikit. Any questions from anyone? Do people boleh buat intervention?
Anyone yang ada question boleh type on chat box, or else boleh tanya straight away to Datuk. So boleh on the audio kalau ada question.
Sudah cepat sangat lah. Saya minta dia orang buat soalan.
Saya ada question tu, Datuk.
Ada orang.
Okay, who's that? Mana ada?
I'm Michael from Bintulu, Scripts.
Okay, Mr. Michael, proceed.
Yeah, Dato', I want to ask, based on the UN grading now, are we still being considered, Malaysia is still considered a third world country and a very poor country?
The economic status, is it?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think the UN categorizes us. Ours, I thought we say we are a middle income society moving towards high income, because it's measured by certain economic indicators lah.
Okay.
Michael, is that helpful? I
Yeah,
didn't talk about economics. I talked more about human rights.
I mean, yeah, though you don't directly talk about economy, but the situation now you're talking about poverty. Because poverty is part of human right. Is it our poverty caused by natural, or is it our poverty caused by human? So that is the question of human rights here.
Yeah, poverty, even rich countries have poverty. US has some of the more poorer people that I see. If you walk to New York, you will see more poor people in New York than you would see in Chennai, or you would see in, let's say, Kuala Lumpur, because inequality can be quite high. So there isn't a correlation in that sense. A high-income society would automatically have less poverty. Many of the developed countries are seeing a high number of poor, homeless, even with social welfare assistance. I see Khairil, Dr. Khairil.
Yes,
Hi everyone. Hi, Prof. Hi, Khairil from APPGM-SDG. Prof, really illuminating so far.
Okay.
I just have a quick question, Prof, because it's astonishing that something that's that's passed almost 2 years ago has not gained any traction domestically, when it's a very encompassing resolution. But I'm wondering if it's symptomatic of society's assumption that whatever the foreign ministry does typically will relate to external matters lah. So I don't know. I mean, just 2 quick questions, Prof. Do you think there's a role civil society can play in amplifying such contributions domestically? Secondly, probably a little bit idiosyncratic lah, but do you think Wisma Putra has to play some domestic advocacy role also on matters, on matters like this? Because these are things that have domestic implications also. Thank you,
Yeah,
Prof. Yeah.
true. I think firstly, I think civil society in that sense um, should have played a role in holding government accountable to something it proposed at the international level. But somehow even I missed it. I only recently came to know of this when Wisma Putra highlighted this resolution, because we are looking at what Malaysia did in the 2 years in the Human Rights Council. So I think we also, as civil society, need to look at substantive issues and not just firefight popularist questions or concerns that come up, but systematically take it on. I know civil society, like those in the UPR process, are in a constant engagement with Wisma Putra. And from what I heard recently, they have said that Wisma Putra has established a good consultative process to monitor and follow up the UPR process. Now, your second question, I think, is something I think earlier on, one of the ministers tried to do that. I remember I was on the advisory council then when Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah was the foreign minister. He tried to link foreign policies also with domestic and had greater engagement with civil society along that lines. I think it's important. Wisma Putra rightly highlighted it as a press statement. It was carried by Bernama because I did a Google search last night to see which media picked it, and Star did highlight it. But I think beyond that, it was just left at something for the international discussion and not relevant to us. So it's not picked up by Intan. It's not picked up by the secretary to the government. It's not picked up by ICU, not picked up by agencies to then say, how should we then make our delivery of services more compliant to this aspiration that Malaysia advocated. So I would agree, it's whether civil servants have the freedom to think and develop. If not, the 13th Malaysia plan, because it's coming from a Madani government, should make a stronger statement on human rights, on SDG, as policy statements in that context. I think we can alert that, but the civil service culture seems to have developed a culture anti-human rights, because it seemed to be something civil society advocated and the foreign world advocated. People say it's more an American agenda. Only thing now with Donald Trump, he's also against all the UN institutions and doesn't want to fund it and wants to curb human rights because he is being questioned as well. I hope that's helpful, Khairul.
Yes, Prof. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? If not, can we move on?
Prof,
Nurul, ada anybody or Khairi?
Prof, actually we have a few questions in the chat box. Mungkin
Okay.
saya bacakan dulu untuk Prof jawab. Okay. Okay, the first question from Binita. Hi, Prof. I have a question regarding your talk. You have mentioned that in paragraph 3 refer to non-discriminatory grounds. Could you clarify whether the age is included as one of these grounds? Additionally, do you think Malaysia has taken action to eliminate age-based discrimination in contact public service delivery? I think it's about age discrimination, Prof, in
Okay.
paragraph 3.
Okay, I think non-discrimination here, they didn't mention age, but non-discrimination in UN language would cut across all the sectors, which will include gender. Seems gender and empowerment of women is given quite a high highlight. But yes, age, even location, ethnicity, race, religion, all the different indicators, so that service delivery is non-discriminatory. So for that, the people involved, especially in direct services, if they are largely in welfare or in education or in health, should not show anything in disparity to that. Now, because I also moved into the elderly population, sudah sampai 70 tahun sekarang, I have found actually going to HUKM, because I used to be at UKM, going to HUKM, many of the nurses and even hospital staff tend to be quite kind. Sometimes they talk fast, but like checking your blood and checking your eyes, they are quite patient to explain to it. So age is an important factor, and with an aging population, whether the extended services are there for the elderly beyond 65 if they are not working. The next part actually talks about social security. So whether they have savings, which is part, whether your EPF cukup or you have other coverage, health insurance, things like that. I think that becomes more critical at this point in time. So in the hospital appointments I go, a lot of elderly people, wheelchair, and so forth. The hospitals are really packed in that context. But whether elderly, like I've noticed in Singapore, many of the elderly, very elderly persons are still working in restaurants, cleaning tables, or assisting in food distribution because they want to earn a pocket money. Maybe they don't have social security, or they might not have children supporting them, and so forth. So I think elderly care in that context, or even nursing homes, the price of nursing homes is becoming a major issue. The care economy, where if you are pensionable and all, it's different. If not, we have heard complaints in our ground meetings that sometimes welfare officers are not very compassionate. They might scold them or require them to come to the pejabat. So we need to take some extra care in the way we handle the elderly and how we talk to them and how we relate to them. So sometimes civil servants are also overworked. And so sometimes older people see a young civil servant, they might marah the person.
Yeah,
So
true.
that also takes place. So frontline officers of the government need special training to handle elderly from different racial background or group. It's that context. But as I said to y'all before, my experience, let's say in HUKM, some time ago, when I went to check my eyes, I found I had apa tu macam dust falling from the roof, So it's something that's affecting your eyes, or you're seeing a lot of light on a rainy day when you're driving. So I looked a bit anxious when I went to the hospital. So I remember a nurse sitting by my side and explaining to me. And I thought she called me, of course, uncle and all. I could be a grandfather as well. But that was helpful. She didn't know who I am. She's not kind to me because I'm Professor, Datuk, or Doctor, or what. She didn't know who I was because, I just, didn't register myself in that way. But I think it's important for this in the care economy. Sorry for being long. Lagi ada? Dua lagi ya?
Ada satu lagi Prof, sebelum Prof sambung boleh. From Azro, are the human right report even effective despite numerous human right report from the UN violation persists? It's about the report, Datuk.
No, once again,
Okay.
louder a bit.
Okay, about the human right report, even effective or not, Datuk?
Okay. Now, the UN institutions have the right to study, they have the right to publish, but it's then up to the governments to make sure that they comply. So there are difficulties because, let's say on the Palestinian case, there are so many resolutions, declarations, reports on violation or genocide, these kind. Rohingya has that, Sri Lankan Tamil population, the act of the army and so forth. All these reports are there, but who is going to police these decisions or guidelines? Then it is the international community. Sometimes sanctions are used, like against North Korea or in certain countries and situations to compel them. Or in in reputation, private sector then doesn't invest in the countries and so forth. Without them, there is no area for discussion. So some people say the UN is useless, it can't, and so forth. But the UN is an institution set up by the government. So if the governments don't contribute, like the US wants to pull out all its assistance to WHO, then of course it's going to suffer because the UN is not a country that has its own money. It's the contributions from member states that are given. So there are challenges, but it is something that the international community, so like, for example, if the international court has a subpoena for your arrest, and if you travel and are caught, like the former Philippines president, then you are brought to the Hague for trial for war crimes or criminal breach that you have done. So it can take action to people if they have violated. So some would say some countries that are powerful are let go and so forth. But it is the framework that is now available. But the human rights in this resolution, it's more a right to development, right to people in interior of Sarawak, far away, dalam kawasan pedalaman, to have access to drinking water, to have access to communication tools, access to schools, so that in Malaysia they don't feel they are really marginalized in that context. Okay, the final one. Ada tiga.
About how the Malaysia overcome the institutional and policy barrier to integrate about the human right. Means
Can you read the comment? I can't see it.
Okay. Dato', in your point of view, how can Malaysia overcome the institutional and policy barrier to effectively integrate of human rights. It's about the institutional and policy barrier.
Okay. I actually, the federal constitution is a document built on a Bill of Rights, because the federal constitution is similar to that of India, of Sri Lanka. It's a post-Second World War document that has a strong human rights basis to the document. Now, it's in the orientation of the civil service that human rights, like SDG, is an acceptable development framework that actually will ensure fairness and justice for all. Because human rights is not seeing favoritism to one group, it's seeing favoritism to the most vulnerable. So whether you're Malay, Chinese, Indian, or what, if there are violations of human rights, whether you're male, female, elderly, poor, and from whichever location, then the human rights framework views you impartially. So part of it is mindset change. So I think the Madani government, with its reformist agenda, needs to push it. I have a slide highlighting how the law ministry, with some of the amendments they have brought to the constitution on citizenship or the parliamentary service bill, are starters towards it. But maybe more work on the Ombudsman, Whistleblowers Act, other legislative changes that might be necessary. But the key here in this resolution is the delivery system promotes human rights and will ensure the protection of human rights. So the protector of human rights is not an external body, but the civil service itself is what the resolution is highlighting. Okay, Khairi, kita lanjutkan?
Boleh, Datuk.
Okay, I'll go fast. How many more minutes? About half an hour, is it?
Yeah.
And with question time or more than other question time lagi?
Ada-
So
ada
if
juga.
anyone has questions as I go along, please note it and post it. And then our moderator and Nurul will help me so that we can. So think through your questions. You can agree or disagree with me. You can add to something I'm saying as well. And if you are in the civil service, you might know of things you all are doing which I didn't. Please highlight.
Okay, sure, Datuk.
Okay. So now, the report on the role of the public service delivery, the Office of the High Commissioner a year later wrote a report to highlight best practices, challenges, recommendations, and assist national governments in delivering transparent, accountable, and efficient. So the reference is there. If you use the reference, you will get the document. Now, here, the UN report, some general findings. So the report highlights a few general themes that comes out. Firstly, it's the role of the public service as an essential component of good governance in the promotion. This is something we already noted. The report says 38 stakeholders gave feedback, including Malaysia and other global organizations. The report emphasizes a human rights-based approach. Public services, it's highlighting education, health, social welfare. It's highlighting the provision of public goods, essential for human rights, education, health, and food. So here, when we are looking at poverty, it shifted its attention not just to welfare assistance. It's looking at education, health, social welfare in the broader sense to empower the poor to move on. And the main concerns are underinvestment in the provision of public services. Malaysia has invested quite a bit on education, healthcare, and social welfare. I think the questions have always been the quality of that investment or education and so forth. So underinvestment is something the High Commissioner is saying in many countries because of debt or corruption, they are unable to invest in basic services. And then there is a call to human rights principle of non-discrimination. So non-discrimination is key. Sometimes you can feel you're discriminated because you don't belong to the right political party, or you are not from the same kampung, or you are not the same gender. So discrimination is not just felt on the basis of ethnicity or race, and so forth, even religion, because people from within the same religion might discriminate on the basis of other indicators. For participation in policy making and service delivery, it's equitable delivery. So that means a lot of our delivery of services are in the urban areas. So it's not so equitable if you are in the rural. So the rural-urban migration is high because everything is in the urban. Development is in the urban areas. But the rural is important as well. The Kawasan Desa is very important because of food safety, food security, food sufficiency, for climate change, and so forth. And also it's highlighting gender equality, reducing inequality of income. It's promoting peace, justice, and strong institution. So the High Commissioner's report is narrating this. Of course, in between, the report has examples of countries I didn't take. So at every point, there is an illustration of a country or a best practice, which you can look at. Now, there are 6 key findings in the High Commissioner's report. The 6 key findings are implications to poverty and inequality. It's a delivery based on human rights and SDG, taking multi-dimensional poverty approach to poverty and inequality. Multi-dimensional because it's moving away from just income measurement. So somebody is poor because their salary is low or their income is low, but other indicators are not taken seriously. Here, the High Commissioner's report looks into 6 different areas. We can go into detail. I'll just highlight. So highlighted, a lot of people don't have social security, no savings. So if you can't work, you fall ill, then you are totally dependent already because you don't have a pension, you don't have SOCSO, you don't have EPF. Then a lot of people who are self-employed or housewife, because the husband passes away, and if he was an odd worker or in the low income or he was a farmer, then so there are a lot of initiatives on social security. So it's not just about welfare grants and assistance, it's much higher. And health is a major area of testing people's well-being in terms of health and healthy living. So it is kind of illnesses and diseases people fall into, diabetic and so forth. And care and support because of the aging society and the need of carers, its impact on women. These were the right to education in the context of private and international schools. And this is highlighted quite that the quality of education that kids are exposed to, makes them more vulnerable because they can't compete with kids who go to international school locally. Then there is the class divide as a result. The role of local government in public service delivery, because this is at the ground level. So it's not Putrajaya already, it's at the district level where people are coming in touch with different people and services. And 6, they highlight privatization. Here we have a lot of GLCs, a lot of government institutions that have taken on even hospitals and so forth, which can become an issue with public-private partnerships. And that report is highlighting about very market profit oriented approaches, which then is parked under this kind of a thing, which takes away the role of government from essential services, is a theme. So this is from the report. I just highlighted, but this is something that we need to look at. Now, I'm then asking myself this simple question. This was a document on 3rd April 2023. Star and Bernama carried it. However, this resolution and content were not widely circulated in Malaysia. I myself got to know of it only a month or so ago. It has not become a reference point for agencies to adopt the guidelines on efficiently delivering based on human rights and SDG. Both the resolution and the report is a useful tool for the transformation of the public sector. I think Dr. Khairil just now raised the question why Wisma Putra's good work in Geneva doesn't become a benchmark at the national level. And this is where academicians and researchers can highlight, especially if this was Malaysia-sponsored resolution in the 2 years as a key contribution to public sector delivery. Now, the resolution has a strong emphasis on human rights and SDGs. I think it's a very good resolution and very good content. And so Wisma Putra should be congratulated for its effort. The government in 2023 took this up at Geneva. The SDG, on SDG, government has many reports like the VNR 2017, 2021, and now 2025. However, on human rights, the focus has been on Suhakam, but government agencies take a very conservative position. I've not read the government report on human rights, and maybe the Madani government through the 13th plan or in its future write-up, if it does a review of the National Human Rights Action Plan, which was done during the Najib administration, which many called for review and updating and more compliance to a human rights framework. Maybe that is something government should work on, the National Human Rights Action Plan by the Madani government. And also in our exposure to the law agency within the Prime Minister's department on various initiatives for political reform and legislative change, like the citizenship, the Parliamentary Service Act, and they have a whole stack of new themes emerging: whistleblowers, separation of the AG from the public prosecutor, the Public Defenders Act, and so forth, ombudsman. So I think there are various things that are coming, but it's not really built on this agenda of human rights and reform. And so I think there needs to be a more visible civil service on human rights and SDG. So I've sat in meetings with civil servants who have never heard of SDG. And she said, Doktor, sebelum kita berbincang, boleh terang apa ini SDG? Then we have to tell the 17 SDG goals and so forth. Because they are very clear in their mandate. Their mandate is pendidikan, kesihatan, the one. But SDG is like cross-cutting. So I think this is something we seriously need to look at, that the civil service in its briefing and in its guidelines will actually aspire to take on this kind of institutional changes in the mindset of the civil servant, that it is legitimate, it is acceptable for them to use the language of human rights. You are now not anti-government, you are not opposition. Sebab opposition sudah jadi kerajaan sekarang. So there is this change now that there has to be an ideological shift in the civil service, and it should be more compliant to the federal constitution, to the legislative changes that are being proposed. Now, in this resolution, para 30, on citizens' needs and feedback, there was, para 3 lah, not 30. Silap saya, para 3. Sebab ini ada 11 para only. So saya pun sudah kelang kubut lah. How I got para 30. So please correct it. It's only para 3. Citizens' needs and feedback is key vehicle to ensure efficient, accessible, accountable, transparent public. So greater engagement with citizens groups on the ground. So we don't have local government election. Our local authority is different from the DO's office in coordination of services and so forth. So APPGM since 2020 has undertaken ground level mapping of local issues through field visits. Our methodology is an efficient tool in enhancing effective delivery based on human rights and SDGs. So that means we are going to the ground, we are consulting people, we are using the parliamentary process, we are using focus group discussions in that context. So citizens' feedback is something we have mastered over the last 5 years. Now, in our localizing of SDGs to ensure effective delivery, has been working with at the district level with government, local communities, solution providers, and parliamentarians. So we undertake these 5 things: mapping local needs, interagency dialogue, micro solution projects, policy solutions through district, SDG district level task force, and parliamentary policy groups on local needs and issues. So what we are saying is a framework to poverty and inequality needs to change in its way of operation at the ground level with greater interaction with local people. Now, we do what is called mapping findings. So the mapping findings, this is some discussion at a kampung in Kota Belud. So it's poverty and gender, a challenge to access welfare. It is recognized that social welfare has many demands, many target groups. They are understaffed. They are not all well-trained. The social worker bill is not out yet. So in addressing poverty, we need to address the needs of the agency that's the prime mover at the ground. And this is something coming out from our ground discussion from the people. Now, We also in this identified like small island communities. We ourselves have visited 12 island communities out of the 300 or so, which has inhabitants, local issues such as poverty, education, a lack of drinking water, living condition, issues related to waste management. They are fishing and agricultural communities. They face climate change and environmental concerns. And so in this kind of a situation, poverty is quite acute, and it's not just singular to income. It has to take a much more holistic approach. And this was a visit made by our team very recently in Tuaran, as they visited this kampong on stills in that area. So small island communities that we find across the country and the kind of issues they are facing. Now, we also look through what we note is a lack of focus group discussion between agencies and local communities, especially in urban locations such as flats, where there isn't enough conversation to get the community involved in addressing poverty, because our focus is more an individual family approach as opposed to a community neighborhood approach. And it needs to switch into multidimensional poverty as well as interagency cooperation. So there's a kind of a dialogue with agencies and so forth that took place by our team at the ground recently. Now, we also do interagency dialogue with SDG mapping. Out of the 26 locations last year, 21 had a DO or KDO or an ADO chairing it. Now, this is quite significant because in the past, the district office was the center of it, and somewhere along the line, the place of the district office as a coordinating base across for all communities and with local authorities developing, there is some confusion along those lines. But in the work we are doing, we are seeing a significant role by DOs and ADOs in the context. And even in 2025, our findings are presented in 10 out of the 11 interagency dialogue. They were chaired by a DO or an ADO in the context. And this is one in Lumut where the DO of Manjung was involved in the discussion. So what we are seeing is this stakeholder and so forth needs to become the focal point. And this is another example in Sampurna, where in Sabah regional team hosted with the Sampurna district office, 21 agencies emerged. Focus of strengthening collaboration among stakeholders to address local issues, effective, inclusive way using SDGs. Now, capacity building, as we say, is another major issue, and this was in Kota Baru, and many capacity building programs that have taken place to strengthen local leaders' understanding of SDGs and so forth. And that is something that needs to be organized, and our team is trying to reach out to all the districts that we are visiting now. Now, this is another program directly with Intan, and Dr. Khairil, who is here, delivered a series of lectures to diplomatic PTD cadet in that context. So this is something in which if we can enlarge Intan's, whether postgraduate diploma, other management courses to include this kind of resolution, deeper understanding on the implementation would be quite significant. Then you have a new generation of PTD officers who no more takut of human rights or SDG or the UN, but are much more able to utilize that framework for effective delivery. Now, our policy solutions team, we got some extra funding through YAS and Hazana to reach out to 55 locations. We appointed 40 local coordinators at DBL in this context. And so these are initiatives that we are looking at district level, where we are seeking to get government approval. And here we are, in order to reach the districts, we got the support of Ministry of Economy. So far, 7 states and 1 Wilayah Persekutuan has given in writing approval to set up a district level task force to address these kind of local issues. And this was a meeting at the Sarawak with the Sarawak State Secretary. This is our first district level SDG at Kuala Nerus district, where we begin to work with the district officer and others to present the mapping reports and find local solutions to them from a human rights and SDG perspective. So these are possibilities that through the parliamentary group we are able to facilitate, but much more needs to be done. Now, this was a discussion on peace, justice, SDG 16, recently in the preparation of the VNR. But we had agencies highlighting, but more needs to be done to bring a human rights perspective and SDG. Most of these officers were not looking from a human rights perspective, but their input was very valuable in what they shared, and their openness. This was in Kuching. Yeah. Oops, sorry. This is my final slide. And then we can go to resolution, which we have looked at, and then looked at the High Commissioner's report, and then our own work. Resolution 52/8 is a timely reminder to our civil service to adopt a human rights approach and SDG in service delivery. I think it's something Malaysia sponsored. So we got the backing of the current government that this is a legitimate concept, ideology, and so forth. Second, there is tremendous potential at the grassroots, civil servants. There is tremendous potential. More resources such as training and capacity building is needed for district level officers from federal, state, and local government. So much more training and orientation. And thirdly, this is my own simple conclusion, like how the High Commissioner wrote the report. I think every agency should produce a yearly report on how they are promoting and protecting human rights and SDGs through their services as an outcome of this resolution, so that it is quite clear for documentation, case study, and writing. So with those words, thank you very much. And if there are any more questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Datuk. Okay. We have a few questions from audience. Maybe boleh saya bacakan untuk Datuk? Okay. For the first one, when we talking about the framework, which is the framework use the international human rights standard and principle to promote human rights. How do you think this will interplay with the financial sector? So maybe
No, human rights, how does it work?
okay, about the framework, use the international human rights standard and principle to promote human rights. How do you think this will interplay in the financial sector? So how to relate to the financial sector?
Now, Malaysia sponsored resolution.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not getting it.
Okay. Actually, when we're talking about the framework, it's about the human right. So how this will affect to the financial sector is have
How
relation.
will it affect the financial sector?
Yeah.
Dia macam ni, Datuk. Dia macam ni. Well, right now we are talking about human right. So bila kita referring to the human right based approach, which is framework HRBA, macam mana benda ni akan effect pada financial sector, because as we know, financial sector normally will be focused benefit to the stakeholders. So daripada situ kita nak tengoklah the impact of the this framework to the stakeholders.
Okay, I think there is a lot of changes in the financial sector. The financial sector now has compliance to sustainability. Financial sector like banking and public listed companies must follow sustainability declaration. They have to do the audit. Foreign investment, let's say you have child labor, then your product cannot be sold already. If your product comes from land that is taken from orang asli, orang asal people, then the timber cannot be sold. Let's say in EU, in other countries. So the compliance to human rights is actually quite high. Unless you are trading with North Korea and some parts, some countries, they don't comply to human rights. So let's say Malaysia, the oil palm, if it's coming from companies that didn't comply with sustainability principles, then the products cannot be sold, you know. So I would feel the company side, if you are a highly corruptible country, your investment will drop. Compliance to human rights will actually reveal higher credibility for investors. So it is not the other way around. You won't want to go and invest in a country where crime, the judicial system is not trustworthy, because you do a contract, the legal system doesn't support it. Investment won't come. So even is going to situations depending on what areas lah. So I don't think compliance to human rights is negative, because the institutions like World Bank, IMF, all this are UN related, and they are coming from international firms. So let's say you want to borrow to do something. If you are doing a project that is like illegal, violating human rights, the bank won't lend you, you know. So it is contrary to the idea that human rights will restrict investment. So if your country is less corruptible, your investment will not reduce, you know. So if, unless some people want to go to a country where they want to use corrupt methods. So that's my take. I don't think human rights will impact negatively. So let's say a company now bring foreign worker. Okay, if you bring foreign worker and don't pay the workers proper salary, then certain countries will blacklist you. Like what happened during COVID time, where migrant workers got COVID because they have no place to sleep, their housing conditions were bad. Even our labor fined certain big companies that violated human rights of workers. So, of course, trade unions were restricted, but you see, developed countries laws you have to adhere, investment you have to follow, financial procedure. And I know Security Commission now, if you don't follow ESG, your will drop. Itu pandangan saya lah. Unless the person asks the question want to disagree with me lah. Boleh juga. Next question.
So Aina Sakinah ada nak apa orang kata nak ribat balik pada Prof ke? So tak adalah tu kot. Tu ada bawah lagi. Boleh proceed the next, Dr. Khairi.
Okay.
Datuk, we have another question. Specifically for the target poverty reduction program.
Just 1 minute.
How can our government...
Stop. Okay. Dah. All right. How can I see the questions?
Chat.
Oh,
Dekat
the
chat
chat.
box.
Okay.
Chat
Okay.
box.
All right.
So right now we are at the Zulaikha Ismail punya question.
Which question are you in?
Zulaikha Ismail. Second
Yang
from
ini.
last. Second from last.
Datuk tekan sini. Listen. Akma.
Yang mana?
No. Second last.
Zulaikha ni.
Yeah,
Okay.
Zulaikha Ismail.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to know how Malaysia sponsored. Okay. The additional topic on poverty eradication and inequality was something I added. So the resolution itself doesn't have the word poverty eradication and addressing inequality, but it talks about effective delivery of services. I was applying it in specific way to poverty and inequality. In that context, it's from the High Commissioner's report, where the focus on addressing poverty and inequality shifted from just grants or welfare assistance towards what one may call social security, the more main points. Let me just come to that slide, where the right to social security, health, education. So I was then making the inference from this that Malaysian focus should shift from income measurement to multidimensional poverty, which is one of the themes that came up in the 11th Malaysia Plan and in the 12th Plan. But it is more as a measurement tool rather than a delivery tool. So the shift for Malaysian poverty context then should address a more multi-dimensional approach, is what I'm then highlighting here. So the delivery of services then needs to be not a silo approach. Very often now, ministries operate in a silo way: welfare, health, And then there are so many overlapping assistance through education and welfare and assistance and so forth. So there needs to be a far greater integrated approach. And that integrated approach should be at the district level, so that the agencies directly handling the families are able to work together, as well as with civil society or the local community to address the concerns. So it cannot be the education and other. So you already got 3 or 4 agencies addressing the same family. But the family then is packaged to assess. So that is the theme I'm bringing out. I hope that is clear. Boleh?
Boleh,
Do you want to
Datuk?
come back?
Boleh, Datuk. Okay, the next question, Datuk, from Nick Ziwatu about
Dari Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Datuk. Okay, the line. Datuk, are you hear me?
Datuk tengah baca.
Yeah, this is from Nick.
Yeah.
So how can government integrate poverty eradication goals with international trade? Now, Nick, in my experience, or in the experience of APPGM, most of the micro operators are not yet ready for international collaboration. Because they are in the interior, they are rural, they are small, they are micro. So the poverty eradication program, let's say on ecotourism, could highlight through the use of technology or web-based to highlight their availability of their homestay or the forest visit or the mountains or the other things in their context, so that foreign tourists or others, local as well, might want to visit their place. So in that sense, it can. Linking straight with international trade might be tough, but linking with other tourism focus might be better. I think the complaints we are getting from micro operators is that they don't seem to get the support from the agencies because they are small and micro, as opposed to others who are much larger, much bigger, and ready for international and scaling up. So a lot of the people that we are working with are requiring hand-holding process, but they are then moving away from dependency from grants and handouts into more resilient approaches. So the poor has the ability for resilience, and ecotourism is key, but how would we promote them? So, for example, Tasik Chini, or areas like the lake by Bre, and so forth. These are highlights, but many of these places have been affected by environmental damage that took place through mining and other forms that were indiscriminately given permission. So these are areas that the environmental impact assessment, EIA, or others, there should be greater restraint in these areas to certain agencies giving permit to people for mining or other things that damage the environment, damage the livelihood, like in Tasik Chini, for local orang asli community. So like this, it could be sand mining, it could be clearing mangrove, which then has a net effect on rural, coastal fishing communities that affect their livelihood lah. So those are some examples, Nick, if you want to. The next question is Eddie, with your team to supporting SDG conducting workshop.
That's not a question,
Okay,
Datuk.
that one is just
Yeah,
tanda
just statement.
soalan lah.
Tak ada soalan.
Okay. Anything else?
Datuk, okay, saya nak tanya.
Sure.
This is not my field, but I just want to know because in your presentation kan Datuk ada cakap yang this resolution is not widely circulated in Malaysia. So I would like to know lah how dia right now after 2 years right now kan dia resolution kan 2023 right started kan? So until right now 2025. So how does it fulfill it roles to macam mana dia play dia punya role untuk fulfill the key themes, yang 3 key themes tu. Dia fulfill ke tidak?
I think in terms of the Human Rights Council, the High Commissioner's report and the follow-up will carry on. So the agency representing Malaysia will attend the meeting. So maybe it's a laporan to Wisma Putra, but it doesn't become information to the rest of us.
Oh, okay.
So there is no excitement that such a major sponsored document, which I think is a very important piece of resolution for effective delivery using human rights and SDG, is sort of sidelined and not given center stage. So now either Intan or the secretary to the government or somebody need to sponsor it dalam or information ministry to highlight. So when you all invited me, Kyrie, so I thought apa saya nak cakap. So I thought this is something new. And I added poverty and inequality because it was the Ungku Aziz Center, although the document doesn't specify that in that context. So a lot of things happening within government agencies are not known. Actually, that is a sad thing. So in this, so cerita buruk is very fast. Everybody know. But good things government agencies buat itu, people don't know. And part of it is, government agencies must produce a laporan or something to highlight. That means this year we received 100 million. Okay. How did we spend the 100 million? What are best stories? What were our challenges? And things like that. So at least academicians like you and me boleh baca lah when we are writing our report or want to do this review. If so not, there is no bahan other than newspaper cutting or ucapan di parlimen by the menteri, kalau ada soalan, that kind. So government agencies are not being held accountable to, okay, they got R1 billion. What did they do in the previous year? We then get Auditor General's laporan bila a screwdriver that was 10 ringgit was bought at 100 ringgit. But we don't know the good things they have done. And many agencies are doing tremendous things on the ground. This is not for publicity personally, but to highlight based on the deliverables that the agencies are producing. Like this document. Kalau I didn't visit Wisma Putra and the pegawai didn't brief me, saya pun tak tahulah. now that I know, I won't keep quiet about it. I'm telling you all. But I hope that this will popularize the document, and it will be a good benchmark to change government thinking that human rights is a bad topic. Actually, it's a good topic.
Yeah.
Private sector will comply to human rights because they want to make money, right?
Betul?
If you make money by doing a good thing, then you will. If not, you are blacklisted. Like if you don't pay your migrant worker proper salary, then there is the complaint. Then your company is blacklisted, not only locally, internationally. You cannot trade already. You are then put as a trafficking group. So you tidak boleh dapat any investment. All will boycott you. So it is not like if I comply to human right, saya akan lose my apa tu contract ke this one lah. Atau I want to pay cheap. So saya don't want to employ local person. I want to employ a foreign worker. So I can pay him 100 ringgit. Local want 200. So I don't want local. I want a foreign worker. I can bully the foreign worker. Kerja 10 jam, 20 jam. Dia takkan lari from me. A local will take a court action against me. So all those practices are wrong in a modern developed nation like Malaysia. You cannot. You have to pay proper salaries, working condition, which are all based on rights. You cannot use exploitative untuk keuntungan diri saja. So there are laws now protecting our countries in that way lah. Okay.
Okay, Datuk.
Okay, Datuk, that is the last question from Dr. Shikin. Okay,
Okay.
I think that's all for Q&A session. I would like to extend my appreciation to Datuk for the sharing your expertise, your valuable insight with us, and your contribution actually enrich our understanding of the intersection between human rights, SDG, and public policy in Malaysia. Next, I will give to pass to Suhaila for end of the session. Thank you.
Dr. Harry, you are passing to me. Okay, thank you, Dr. Harry. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Okay, Professor Dr. Dennis. Okay, Denison. Okay. Thank you, Datuk, for a very insightful lecture. Lots of information I learned because it's not my field, but I learned something today. I learned a lot. So yeah, thank you for the audience as well because stay sampai hujung ni, which is kita dah almost 12:20. Kalau tak dia kita punya limit nanti boleh pergi 12:30. So yeah, this is not our last public lecture. Kita akan ada lagi for the next month and the next month. So waiting the update from us from the UAC. So orang kata apa? Before I end the public lecture for today, we are from UAC. Apologies if anything from our side yang tidak memenuhi apa orang kata tidak memenuhi lah apa-apa persoalan ke apa-apa ke, and we're so sorry. And then before we end, boleh tak saya nak minta everyone please turn on the camera sebab kita nak tangkap gambar for the group photo, for the record for us. Boleh on the camera? Saya nak tengok juga siapa yang di belakang tabir, di belakang kamera, yang handsome, yang cantik-cantik. Mungkin saya akan serahkan kepada Cik Fadli. Tolong snapshot nanti Fadli.
I see, Dr. Lin. You should have asked a question, Dr. Lin, or a comment.
Dr. Lin, yang question? Okay. Nak proceed apa ke? Datuk nak ada apa-apa ke?
No, no.
Datuk?
I was
Sadia?
just
Okay.
joking with a
Okay.
friend of mine.
Oh, your friend. Okay. Fadli?
Ya, ya, dah. Dia berdiri
Okay,
tadi.
Fadli tolong take over.
Okey, semua dah buka kamera
Semua
kan?
dah open camera ya. Please open your camera, turn on. Give your best smile.
Okey, nampaknya dah. Ya. Ready semua? Satu, dua, tiga. Satu lagi. Satu. Ada yang baru buka. Satu, dua, tiga. Okey, terima kasih.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending
Okay,
our
thank
public
you.
lecture. Yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
Datuk.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Datuk Adi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.